Individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Supernatural, metaphysical, paranormal. You know, all those things you've been wondering about? Are you ready to go deeper into the realms of the unknown? I hope you've got your walking shoes on, because life is an adventure, and this is the journey. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Jen Cruz, and this is the Journey Radio Show. Hey, we're showing up as the She-Squatchers like we do every week. And so I've got my trusty teammate, Tammy Trickle, with me. Hey, Tammy.
Hi, everybody.
Yay. Well, Jenna will not be joining us tonight. She's unavailable this evening, but we've got this covered, don't we, Tammy?
We definitely have it covered.
Okay. So tonight we have an amazing guest planned for you guys. His name is Marc Myrsell. And hey, Marc, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Awesome.
Okay, at least you can hear me.
Yes. We can't get you on the video, I guess, but for now we're happy just to be able to hear your voice and get you on the show. So we're happy for that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
I'm still working. I'm still working on some video settings here.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you're able to talk and do that at the same time.
Yeah, I can a little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
a little bit.
All right. Would you like me just to read your bio for everybody while you try to figure the
Sure,
rest out?
sure.
Okay. All right. Let me grab that real quick. And while I'm doing that, I'm just going to tell you all some exciting news. We just scheduled, just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, we scheduled, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? 2 days ago. We scheduled to be at an event in Nebraska, April 23rd and 24th, 2021. We're going to be in Hastings, Nebraska at the Nebraska Bigfoot Conference put on by the Bigfoot Crossroads of America Museum. So y'all are going to have to come and see us if you can, if you're within the area at all, to come down and see us April 23rd and 24th. And not to worry, I will be fully vaccinated by then. So we're all good. It is an outdoor event. It's going to be held at the historic pavilion right there in Hastings. And so it has a roof, a stage, and 3 walls. So it's completely open and the fresh air will be running and masks will be worn. So we hope everyone who can make it come out and see us there. So let me tell you about our guest tonight. His name is Marc Myrsell. He's here to share stories of Bigfoot and the Ape Canyon Incident. He was born in 1966, is a land surveyor in Southwest Washington and Northwest Oregon, having been raised by his father as such, chopping brush and carrying stakes for 50 cents an hour since he was 12 years old. Very early, he realized that there was something else going on in the woods. Beginning in 2006, he began a reinvestigation into the 1924 Ape Canyon Incident, culminating in the rediscovery of the 1924 cabin site in 2013. He continues his work on placing historic monster encounters on the ground in real time with continued efforts on Ape Canyon, the Thompson Flat Monster in Southwest Oregon, and the Fife Heights Incident near Tacoma, Washington, amongst others. So that's who we're having on the show tonight. Marc, are you ready for us?
Oh, sure, you bet. 2 things, Jen. Number one, this is like a left coast, right coast kind of thing. How do you pronounce the state that's just below Washington?
Oregon?
Yeah, it's Oregon. With a gun.
I'm in Minnesota.
Yeah, I know.
How do you say Minnesota?
Minnesota. My ancestors landed there about 1850 in Le Sueur. if that's how you pronounce Lesueur, it's like very very near Worthington, Minnesota. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and so yeah, Minnesota, yeah. But out here you pronounce it Oregon. Just so
Oregon.
you know. But also, I was also invited to the Hastings conference, which I'm not going to be able to make. Um, I would very much like to make Hastings. I can't remember how I was invited, but a fellow invited me out there. I'd like to be out at Hastings very much on that. So anyway, sorry for that nonsense, but that's how you pronounce Oregon. That's how you pronounce Oregon.
Okay, well, I'm sorry about that. I can't promise that I will always say it correctly, but I will try.
No, it's fine. And
Awesome. Awesome.
I'm terribly sorry about the video connection. I can't figure out how to make a video connection tonight on this.
It's all good. We're live on the radio right now. It doesn't matter.
Okay, that's
So
cool.
can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got interested in looking into Bigfoot and these historic events?
Oh, sure. And our good friend, I remember seeing our good friend Lyle Blackburn presenting at a Bigfoot conference, golly, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. And Lyle got up on the podium and he's like, I'm kind of known as the Boggy Creek guy, as Lyle Blackburn is. And me, out here, out of the outer coast, I'm kind of known as the Ape Canyon guy. And so for me, I was raised as a land surveyor. My dad is a land surveyor, or was a land surveyor. And so I grew up with my dad out in the field for 50 cents an hour, carrying stakes and chopping brush for 50 cents an hour with my dad. But I was born in 66. And so I kind of came of age like 7 or 8 or 9 years old. When one gets inquisitive at that age of the outer world beyond your home. And so that was me growing up like in 1972, 1973. And so at that time, a lot of us were inundated with this sort of resurrection of in pop culture of the unknown. We were, inundated with B movies and stuff on TV, stuff in books like Rod Serling's book Chariots of the Gods, or where we saw these B movies like Sasquatch, Legend of Bigfoot. All this stuff in the early 70s about looking for Atlantis and looking for the pyramids and looking for, lights in the sky. And so I remember as a very young lad watching reruns of particularly Sasquatch Legend of Bigfoot on KPTV Channel 12 in Portland, where that was one of the movies, the docudramas, where they reenacted this whole 1924 Ape Canyon incident, an incredible story. And I remember in this recreation when I was a kid, 7 or 8 years old, of these shadowy figures in the movie throwing these huge boulders on top of this mining cabin with the miners, held up inside, apparently being attacked by these large, hairy, unknown creatures. And this image of these shadowy creatures really stuck in my mind. And uh, much later, maybe about 10 or 12 years ago, these images kind of came back to me, and I started reinvestigating the whole 1924 attack with Ape Canyon. And so, generally, that's how I got back into or that's how I got into the whole Bigfoot research community.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, for our listeners, can you tell us about that? So I'm sure many of them are very unaware of what that is all about.
Well, you know what, Jen, as we age, it kind of surprises me when I talk to people I'm 54 years old. I was born in 1966. And so when I was a kid, maybe 10, 12, 14, 15 years old, hey, do you know about the Ape Canyon incident? Oh, geez, everyone knows about Ape Canyon. But as I get older, golly, there are a lot of people that don't know about the Ape Canyon incident, and I'm frankly shocked because when I was a kid, everyone knew about Ape Canyon. Everyone who was interested in like, oh, the extra normal or the supernatural or anything, everyone, are into Bigfoot, everyone knows about Ape Canyon. But now a lot of people don't, and I'm kind of shocked. But the Ape Canyon incident, very briefly, and I'll try to like run this down very shortly. In let's see, July the 11th, 1924, there was a group of miners, 5 men, and they had been working a gold mine for about 2 years. They had just previously built a cabin up on the east flank of Mount St. Helens, and just in the spring of 1924. And they came off the mountain on the morning of Friday, July the 11th. They met the Forest Service ranger and they said, no, "We're giving it all up. We're not going to be mining anymore. We're giving up the cabin. We're giving up the gold mine." After an all-night attack upon their cabin and upon themselves, held up inside from a band of what Marion Smith, the head of the mining crew, called Mountain Devils. And this had basically all started 2 years prior, but during that week in 1924, it all started with Marion Smith and Fred Beck going to the spring for water, and they had seen this creature peeking out from behind a cedar tree. And they went to the spring, just about 75 feet away from the cabin site, and this creature was peeking out from behind this tree. Fred picked up his revolver and took 3 shots at the creature, and this is roughly about 300 feet away. And they Fred took shots, and Marion and Fred went up there, and when they got to the tree where Fred had apparently laid down this creature, there was no blood, there was no animal, there was no fur, there was nothing. But they could see the side of the cedar tree being skinned from Fred's bullets. And they look up the slope and they see this creature walking away again at about another 300 feet away. And in my mind, it kind of looked like the Patterson Gimlin film of this creature looking back at them, going up the slope and down away. Well, they didn't know what to make of it. This was just before the 4th of July in 1924. And they go back to their family to celebrate the 4th of July. And the thing is that most of these miners were known as very square guys in Longview, Kelso, Washington, back where their home was. And the families couldn't square it up, where these guys were like known as like very solid guys. What they said is what really happened, and if they were going to say that they were going to do something, you could count on it as well. So they're coming back from the mountain, from the gold mining claim, saying that they had just took shots at this 7 to 8 foot tall hair covered creature. So they go back to the cabin. Leroy Smith is going to the spring for water. This is around July the 8th of 1924, and this creature comes out of the brush very close to the cabin that they had just built. Leroy takes a couple of shots at it, very close, and the shots seem to have no effect. The creature turns around and walks back into the brush. And so he tells the guys about it. on the morning of July the 10th, which is a Thursday, the creature comes out again. And at this time, Leroy is coming back from the spring. He takes shots at it. And at this point, all the men are back in the cabin that they had just built like 4 to 5 weeks previously. All the guys come boiling out when Leroy takes a couple more shots at it. Marion Smith estimated there were about 15 to 16 rounds that went into this creature. The last shot was apparently taken by Fred Beck, and the creature was at the top of the slope. And when Fred shoots it for the last time, that during the daytime, the creature either falls off of the cliff or he scrambles down the cliff. Well, at that point, the creatures that were up there up at Mount St. Helens had had enough. All the men are back in the cabin. This is July the 10th, and so the sun's going down pretty late in the day, probably about 8 or 9 o'clock. And the miners are all held up in their cabin, and they were like, man, things are kind of like boiling up. We got to get out of here pretty darn soon. There was a large impact on the cabin at that point. This is a log cabin, and so there's split log chinking to fill in the gaps between the logs. One of the chinkings falls out, and so this huge impact hits the cabin, and the miners look out, and it was a pretty. The reports were there was a pretty large moonlit night where they could see pretty easily. So the miners look out where their chinking had fallen out, and there are about 5 or 6 creatures, 7 to 8 feet tall, dancing around the cabin. They could see them out there, just beyond the cabin. This is a very limited topographic area, so these creatures could have only been like 10 to 20 feet away from the cabin. And then suddenly, all hell breaks loose. And these creatures are climbing up onto the cabin. They're trying to beat their way in through the roof. They're trying to dig their way underneath the foundation of the cabin. The miners are ripping apart their beds that they had made and bolstering the door to keep them out because something is beating their way, trying to beat their way through the door. They're starting to fire the miners are starting to fire gunshots at the roof. They're building up the fire. Please go away. Will, as Fred Beck says in his story in 1966, we'll leave you alone, you leave us alone, and we'll all go home in the morning. And so this attack on their cabin goes on all dang night long. They're firing shots at the cabin, and they're just, please leave us alone. Well, the sun starts to come up about 4 or 5 in the morning, and everything's quiet, and the miners have the courage to, get the stuff off of their door and open the door. Nobody's out there, but boulders and stones have rained down on the cabin all night long. Stone throwers or stick throwers, as they say. And there's rocks scattered all around the cabin, and they find huge footprints, maybe around 13, 14 inches long, apparently human-like footprints. And they're like, man, grab your guns, grab your tobacco, and let's get the hell out of here. And they have to hike back up to the truck, oh golly, maybe about 5 or 6 miles away where they had parked it at Spirit Lake. And it was probably the longest trek of their lives. And they left the cabin, and they pretty much never went back. There was only one report where Fred Beck and Leroy Smith, Marion Smith's son, actually went back to the cabin about a couple days later to lead reporters back up to the site. So that's the basic rundown of the Ape Canyon story incident of 1924.
That's fascinating.
It is fascinating,
Tam,
isn't it?
yeah, it is. It is. It's a very scary experience, I'm sure. And I see that Tammy has a question.
Yeah, I had actually watched the interview that you did with Amy Boo on Wild Boo Yonder
Sure.
previously, and you guys were discussing the photographs of the cabin and that there were no windows, and some of the older photographs that they used were not the same cabin. So my question is, if there were no windows, how did they see them outside and know how many there were out there?
Okay, Cammy, one more. I kind of like flew through that whole reenactment just audio wise. The
Right.
log cabin. I'm so sorry about that. I don't have video right now. One thing that people get confused about is that there are not a lot of photos of the cabin. There are only two photos of the cabin that were taken by an Oregonian reporter, L.T. Gregory, Jack Gregory, when he visited the site about a week later. There were no windows. What it was the cabin was about a 10 to 20 foot, about a 10 to 20-foot cabin, and they were made out of logs of the trees that they had cut down, uphill in order to make the cabin. So when you have the logs stacked up with the cabin, it leaves gaps. And so what they did is they cut uh, other logs and they split them and shoved them into the cracks and packed them with mud, just with the dirt around, to make a
Right.
chinking to fill in the gaps, right? So the story was for the report was that the initial impact that Thursday night on July the 10th, the impact was so hard that it knocked out a hunk of that split log chinking.
Okay.
Now
Yeah.
there is a photo, um, which I can share with you guys if you want to patch it in to this podcast. There is a photo of that split log chinking that was knocked out. So on the narrow end of that chinking, it's zero, but on the wide end of that chinking, it's like, oh, I would estimate maybe like 3 or 4 inches that was knocked out. And so there was just Marion Smith or Fred Beck peeking out of that little hole in through the moonlight in order to be able to see that stuff, see the creatures dancing around.
Interesting. Okay. Well, after watching the interview with Amy, I was like, so how did they know how many people were out there if there was no window? Because that was like part of a big discussion that you guys had. So now I know. Thank you.
Yeah, there were no windows. There are a couple of photos out there, um, but they're just recreations of the cabin itself. So, yeah, there were no windows because one thing everyone needs to realize is that um, initially, when the miners first started to locate this claim, the Vanderwhite mine, they came in from the south off of the Luce River, and they located this in 1922. It was easier for them to go up from the north because they were in Kelso Longview. They went to Castle Rock and then out to Spirit Lake and then parked their truck. Today, and even then in 1924, it's still a good 6 mile hike from the south or from the north. There were no roads going up there. There were some logging roads, but this is way up at the timberline. And so there were no roads to like park your car, 500 feet away from your cabin site or anything like that. This was 6 miles. And so these guys were just bringing in hand tools. And for the first 2 years of working in their gold mine, they were actually tent camping about, golly, maybe 1,000 feet away, maybe a quarter of a mile away from the mine site. Um, and so after 1923, this gold was going. Apparently, the claim was going where they decided to build a cabin very close to the mine. Nonetheless, they were having to haul in every single hand tool that they could think of, or any kind of nail or anything. This was not anywhere close to a truck to pull in lumber or windows or anything like that. So,
Very interesting. I'm imagining this in my mind. I actually helped to build a log cabin, a log house when I was a kid. It took 7 years of weekends, but we did it. But I was 5 years old and stripping the bark off the log, so I know how much work it is. But imagining not having windows, that would be such a dark building. I bet you
this,
that was so scary.
well, Jen, one thing you got to realize too is that this is a very remote site of where they built the cabin. And this is, I'm sorry, I am sorry you don't have pictures or video. This is at the top of Pumice Butte. And so when you get to the top of Pumice Butte, which is about, oh golly, maybe about 150 feet off the bottom of the Plains of Abraham, headed east, you get to the top of Pumice Butte, you still have about 900 feet down a precipitous slope in order to get to the mine site. And so this is all rope work. And so the miners, just above, maybe about 30 or 45 feet above where the mine was, they had built a ladder just out of fir boughs in order to get the last drop down into where they had built the cabin. And so these guys were just like, you know, pulling everything in backpack and just, it was all rope work just getting down to the ladder site. Of course, the ladder is now long gone, but now, in order to get to the cabin site now, it's all rope work, and you're taking your life in your hands when you get down there, frankly.
Very interesting. And I know that you found the cabin site and you're very particular about who you bring up there. How many people have you taken up there?
Well, I was thinking about hanging out with the She-Squatchers tonight, and so I counted out 12.
12. All right. All right.
12.
Have you stayed the night in the cabin?
Well, that brings up a very interesting continuation of the Ape Canyon project. And I was, as Ken just said, I was hanging out with Amy Boo on her show, and well, let me back up a little bit. Uh, I got into this Sasquatch research community, and as you guys know, the Sasquatch research community is nuts. And when I got into the Sasquatch research community, I didn't know anybody at all. And if we have time, let me just give you a brief rundown about how I got into not only Sasquatch research, but the research community. I had heard in the Ape Canyon research that I did, the Ape Canyon research started out as like just purely document research. But then I got clues that there could be some sort of physical evidence left of the cabin site. So I started like looking in the field and making my way down to Pumice Butte, and I had only gotten my way down Pumice Butte a little bit and everything. And but I had heard that Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin may have visited the site somewhere in the early 60s, 62 or 63. So our good friend Johnny Manson runs the Ocean Shores Sasquatch Summit.
Yes.
Yeah, let's see. This is golly, 20 the Sasquatch Summit 2013 or 2014. Well, Mr. Bob Gimlin was presenting that, and so I was like, "Hey, I'm going to go talk to Bob Gimlin and ask him what he remembers about his trip up Ape Canyon." I had only know I at this point on the internet I had only contacted one person, Jamie Trimble, in the Sasquatch community, and so I bought tickets for the Sasquatch Summit, and I didn't know anybody, and so I walked into the conference room, and it's like, hey, there's Jamie Trimble, and I introduced myself, and she's like, oh yeah, we had talked over the internet. I'll introduce you to Bob. Okay, so she tries to introduce me to Bob, and Bob Gimlin is Bob Gimlin, and he's talking to a bunch of people.
Okay. Okay, Mark, we're going to have to go to our commercial break, but we're going to be coming right back, and we'll pick up the story when we get back. Hang on, everybody. We'll be right back.
Right on. I'm here.
Awesome. So we should be at the break now. We can talk during the break. We just have to watch the clock because we're break is about.
Just tell me when to go.
Sarge will come in and.
Just tell me when to go with my continuation of my Bob Gimlin story.
Okay, Bob Gimlin. Yes, we love Bob. We're at the last Sasquatch Summit. We were speakers there too. That is a really fun event.
Okay, I gotta ask you until we get going again. I was in Walmart waiting for my mom to finish shopping. Did I see one of you guys? I was in Walmart.
You may have. We were with Johnny. We were with Johnny.
Yeah, and Johnny says, "Oh my God, it's Mark," and he's like, "Hey, I'm here with the She-Squatchers," and I'm like, "Hey, yeah, whatever. I'm just sitting there by McDonald's. Did I see one of you guys
next to Bob Gimlin.
Yeah, so we saw you at Walmart.
Yeah, okay, maybe so. Okay, that's cool.
That's funny.
I didn't make it. I didn't make it to that summit.
Well, I think we're going to be at the next one if they're having it this year. I haven't heard for sure yet.
I haven't talked to Johnny in a while about that. I hope it is.
I hope so too. I think they haven't. I think that the event center hasn't quite decided yet if they're going to do an event or not.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarge.
3 seconds.
How fun.
I hope he does.
I hope so too. Well,
Johnny's a great promoter, and Sasquatch Summit has brought in a lot of damn good people.
Very cool. Okay, let's be quiet.
Okay.
Go.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Jen Cruz, and hey, we're the She-Squatchers on the Journey radio show. Won't you check us out online at she-squatchers.com? And hey, click on our events page because we have uploaded some new information about our upcoming events in 2021. You're going to want to see it. Come and see us in person wherever you can. Yeah, we know you want to. And then, hey, check out our YouTube channel, which is She-Squatchers Official. You can also and subscribe to us there, and you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. So please like and follow us at all those wonderful places, and we will be happy campers to connect with you. So tonight we've got Marc Myrsell with us. He's about to tell us a wonderful story about Bob Gimlin, one of our favorite guys in the whole wide world. He is very popular with the ladies because he's so charming and sweet. So Marc, tell us more about meeting Bob.
Well, I got to say one thing about what you just said, Jen. Yeah, my friend Brad Angus said, upon meeting Bob Gimlin, oh, he's very smooth with the ladies. Yeah, he's very smooth. So anyway, I purposefully went, and this is how I got involved with the Sasquatch research community. I went to the Sasquatch Summit promoted by Johnny Manson, of course. And the only person that I knew was Jamie Trimble. And I knew that she knew Bob. And I walked in there and I was like, "Hey, Jamie, this is me, Mark. This is like 2013 or 2014, the Ape Canyon guy. Can you introduce me to Bob?" And so Jamie took me over to Bob, and Bob was like super busy with a bunch of people wanting to talk to him, and so I couldn't get an audience with him at the time. So I just parked myself in back, and I was in back of the conference room at the casino, and I'm just watching the presenters, and Bob Gimlin comes around in his huge cowboy hat and his big, brass belt buckle, and he catches my eye, and we nod to each other, and he takes two steps, and then he takes two steps back, and he comes right up to me, and he's like, "Hey, Jamie told me about you. You're that Ape Canyon guy. I really want to talk to you," as Bob says. And he's like, "Maybe we can, after everything gets quiet, maybe we can sit down and talk." So after everyone leaves and all the conference guys are picking up the chairs, Bob gives me about an hour and a half, and he gives me the lowdown of when he and Roger Patterson went up to the Ape Canyon site in about 1962, as Bob estimates. So Bob and Roger, according to Bob, went up to Ape Canyon around 1962, and Bob said that at the time they visited the cabin site, and Bob's thought was that the cabin did not burn down the way Fred Beck says. It was just more crushed by the snows. Bob explained it that it was just kind of like falling in on itself with the winter snows over and over again. And so I showed him a picture of the Oregonian photo of 1924, and Bob was like, "Man, yeah, that's it." So in 2013, I got encouraged by a number of friends, uh, talking to them about the documented evidence that I found and some of the preliminary evidence that I found of looking for this cabin site, because I really felt like through a topographical coincidence, the cabin site could have very well survived the 1980 eruption. So my friends were like, "We want to go, we want to go." So there were five of us in 2013, and we went up to the top of Pumice Butte and scrambled our way down with some rope work and some, life-threatening exercises, and went down to pretty close to the cabin site. There was only one cat that went with me, Gabe Tammy, and because the other guys chickened out. And the thing is, when you look at that photo, when you look at the photo from 1924, you can taken of the cabin, you can see the cabin. In the background, you can see the fir trees silhouetted behind it. In the foreground, in that photo, you can see the stumps of the trees that were cut off in order to build the cabin. Well, I'm a land surveyor, and I know that stumps can last a very, very, very long time in the woods, particularly way up at 3,500 feet, 4,000 feet, way up at the timberline. And so I knew that if we could find rotten stumps, I knew that we would be close to the cabin site. Why? Because I had consulted with the Different Show National Forest Service head of archaeology, and he confirmed that the slope of Pumice Butte had never been commercially logged. This is a very precipitous slope, and he had not found any record that it had ever been commercially logged. So if there were stumps out there, it was probably going to be pretty close to the cabin site. So when Gabe, Tammy, and I got down there, I was fighting my way through the vine maple and everything, and Gabe was, hey, Mark, look what I'm standing on. What? I couldn't see him. He said, I'm standing on a rotten stump. I make my way down there, maybe about another 100 feet, and standing on a rotten stump. We find another stump. We find another stump. And so I break out my metal detector, and that's when we start finding way down, way down out in the middle of nowhere. Start fighting nails. We start to find a piece of baling wire. Eventually, breaking out my metal detector, we end up finding a log, a rotten log about 6 inches underground, about 20 feet long, with the nails driven down into the base of this log. And then we find the side part of the cabin. And we find a spoon, and that's when we knew that we found the Ape Canyon cabin.
Very, very interesting. Tammy.
Yeah.
Come off of mute, girl. Come off of mute. Yes.
I don't know. So I have a question. I have been told that you have a very popular book out that has won some awards. Would you like to share something about that?
Oh, no, that's nothing. It's not worth sharing.
Nothing. That's nothing.
No, it's really nothing. Let's see, what was that? About 2 years ago or so, my love, Catherine, is a longtime librarian. My wife, Catherine, is a longtime librarian, and she like really clued me in about the great work that librarians do, that repositories of documented information do. And so the Washington State Library uh, did just a fun zine contest, like a homemade magazine zine contest, and it had to be on Washington State history, and it had to be on. Also, you had to be a Washington State resident. And so, just on luck, I was meaning to do this for about a year or two previously, and never got around to it. But here at that time, there was a bad snow, and so I just sat down and I made an Ape Canyon zine called Mountain Devil, and it's about 30 pages or so, and it's just a fun zine about the 1924 Ape Canyon attack. And so I submitted it to the Washington State Library for their zine contest, and miraculously it won. It's just it's a lot of fun, but it was just a stupid zine contest, frankly. But it won, and I got $75. So whatever. But pursuant to that, our good friend, also in the Sasquatch research world, Daniel Perez, has strongly encouraged me on pursuing the bigger book. I'm working on a book about the Ape Canyon Incident. It's running around 200 pages, 250 pages or so, about everything Ape Canyon. The 1924 Ape Canyon Incident. Also, I have to tell you, um, um, there's another strange incident that happened up there on May 30th of 1950, in which Joe Carter disappeared. Joe Carter was part of the Mazama group, the Mazama club in 1950, and he went up there with Richard Lee, and they hiked up the dog's head. You guys have to understand what the Mazamas and what a ski club, outdoorsman kind of club looked like in 1950. These guys were downhill skiers, and they would pack their skis onto their back and snowshoe and hike up up to a high point at Mount St. Helens at this point. And they hiked up to Dog's Head, and they started to ski down. And at that point, everyone except Joe Carter was like, okay, we're going to ski back down to the parking lot where we parked our cars, or partway down. And Joe, you ski down, and we're going to take a picture of you. And Joe was like, okay. And so Joe skis down part way, and they take pictures of him, and everyone skis back to the cars. Well, okay. So it's probably, it would only take like Joe maybe like an hour or two to get back to the car. Well, everyone's waiting back at the car, waiting for Joe. And they're sitting at the car, and it's like, where's Joe? They're looking at their clock. They're looking at the watch. Where's Joe? He's not here. What the hell happened to him? So Lee and the others go hiking back up to where Joe departed from Dog's Head, and they follow his ski tracks. His ski tracks go down easterly towards Ape Canyon partway, and then there's suddenly a huge disturbance in the snow. The snow is like scattered all over the place. Joe Carter was known in the Mazamas as a very adept hiker and skier. There's this huge disturbance, and then suddenly they follow it further off. They follow his ski tracks, and the story was, according to Lee, was that they followed the tracks, and Carter's ski tracks were following jumps and following stupid stuff that no skier would ever do. Lee explained it as if he were being chased. They follow his ski tracks further east, and the ski tracks go right off of the edge of Ape Canyon. There was a call to the Community County and the Calvert County Deputy Sheriff, and they pulled out the ski patrol, and there was a search for about 3 weeks or more, and they never found the body. Lee said in an interview later that he was convinced that the apes got him.
That the apes got him?
That the apes got him. That's what Lee said.
Very interesting.
We have some questions from the chat room. Sherry asks, are there any other cryptids there in that area that have been seen?
Okay, there are two answers to that. And in 1920, historically, I'm gonna answer the question historically first. When the 1924 Ape Canyon story broke, a few reporters knew that it was a previous story that had a lot of history in Native culture, in Indian culture. And so they interviewed a fellow from the Cowlitz tribe, a guy named Frank Wanasay. And Frank said that no, what these miners saw as far as this 7 to 8 foot tall creature, he said, no, that's crap. They didn't see that. What's historically known, what Frank Wanasay said that what's known up at Mount St. Helens is actually a 3 to 4 foot tall creature covered entirely with white hair. And so Wanasay was like, no, this Sasquatch-like creature, like 7 to 8 foot tall, red, brown hair creature, no. What's known up at Mount St. Helens It's actually a 3 or 4 foot tall creature covered entirely with white hair. The other thing I got to tell you, and maybe this is an exclusive that I shouldn't talk about. When my friend and I, Brad, were up there, I don't know what to make of it. Brad pulled me over. It was way off trail, but we just found I didn't find it. Brad found it. It looked just like a big bird foot. It was a big chicken track, maybe about, oh golly, maybe about 8 inches long, and with 3 toes, with a tragus coming off the back, just like a chicken foot. I don't know what to make of it, but I have photos. So.
Wow. Okay. Kat asks, the cabin that you were talking about earlier, is that the same one that Jeff Muldrum and others were at in the Monster Quest show years ago?
No, it was not.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I don't have any backup on it, but no, it's not.
Okay.
I got to tell you, if Dr. Jeff called me, I would take him down to the cabin site, but no, that's not that's not it.
Okay. And then Sherry also asks, the creatures that were only 3 to 4 feet tall were throwing boulders?
No, the creatures that were 3 to 4 feet tall were from Frank Wanasay's account to
Okay.
orders. The ones that were throwing boulders were 7 to 8 feet tall, according to Marion Smith and Fred Beck's account.
Okay. And then I did see on the interview with Amy that people had tried to interview Fred Beck, but that he had passed away. But John Pickering was able to interview his son, Ronald.
Yes and no. People, let's see, Ron Olson and Robert Morgan and Roger Patterson were able to interview Fred.
Okay.
Before he passed on. But in recent history, and I got to hand this to John Pickering, who doesn't want a lot of attention, frankly, even though he deserves a lot of attention.
Yes, he does. We love him. He's great.
John is a saint. That's what Derek Randall said, and I will aver that as well. And John, I was trying to get to Ronald Arnie Beck, who co-wrote with Fred, I Fought the Ape Man in Mount St. Helens. I was trying to get to Arnie Beck, and I got to the rest home just after he'd been moved to home care, and Ronald Arnie Beck was gone. But John was able, previous to me meeting John, of course, me, getting into this whole thing, John was able to interview Ronald Beck, and it's a fascinating part of Sasquatch history. From what John told me, Ron kind of considered his dad, Fred Beck, to be somewhat of a Edgar Casey sort of fellow, where Ron, in the late 60s, was pretty convinced that Fred had a connectivity with a different, say, dimension or a different,
Right. Yeah, Edgar Casey was that guy who did the mediumship, right?
Yes.
With like the ectoplasm.
Oh,
the Sleeping Prophet, wasn't he called the Sleeping Prophet? He was very famous.
Oh, Edgar Casey was the Sleeping Prophet. That is true. Yep. But Fred Beck, it's kind of strange about Fred, is that at the time, contemporary interviews in 1924, for whatever reason, people asked Marion Smith and Fred Beck, were you having seances up there, or did you drink booze? And so Marion and Fred said, well, no, we didn't drink booze and we didn't do seances up there. But in the interviews, contemporary in 1924, they did say that, we attended a couple of seances because it was the time in 1924. But we're not mediums or seance people. But the weird thing is that in late 60s, mid 60s, I should say, Fred Beck became somewhat of a spiritual healer on his in his house on Allen in Kelso, where people would come to his house and they would have seances in his house. And Fred swore that they were floating tables and chairs off of the floor, and they're going up to the ceiling, and there's ectoplasm and all this kind of stuff. I can't make heads or tails out of that from what Fred says. But apparently, Fred was a self-styled spiritual healer in Kelso, Washington in the late 60s. And apparently, his son Ronald, believed him.
Very interesting.
Sure is. Sure is. And so if one were to read I Fought the Ape Man of Mount St. Helens, the first part is pretty much what I feel a pretty much good recounting of the 1924 Ape Canyon Incident. The second part of that book is more or less Fred's or Ronald's opinion of Fred's outlook on the cosmos and how the cosmos works. Fred and Ronald goes into great detail about where humans are on the spiritual plane, where he feels these mountain devils or Sasquatch are on a spiritual plane, a spiritual evolutionary plane. Frankly, I can't make heads or tails of it. I really don't know. But I do have to say that when one gets a copy, this is just my prankster stuff. When one gets a copy of my booklet, Mountain Devil, I always sign it, yours in a higher dimensional understanding. And so I cribbed that off the only copy that I know of in the Longview Public Library. It's an original copy in the reference section of I Fought the Ape Man of Mount St. Helens. Fred Beck inscribed his copy, yours in a higher dimensional understanding. And so when I sign anything about Ape Canyon, I sign it the same. Yours in a higher dimensional understanding, even though I have no idea what that means.
I love it. That's a good inside joke now for everybody to know.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it is. Yeah,
So
it's an origin of a catchphrase.
we have less than a minute left on the show. Can you tell people where they can find your book, Mountain Devil?
No, I can't, because I'm not a
Oh,
good promoter at all. But what you can do is
okay.
find me. You can find me on Facebook, Marc Myrsell.
Facebook.
I have to spell it correctly. Sorry, MarcMyrsell. I'm just doing PayPal.
Mike Myrsell on Facebook, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Bye.
Oh, yeah.